Right beneath the old wooden gate, 8 bodies swayed in the hot desert wind. They were hanging upside down, their feet tied tight to a thick beam. Long black hair fell toward the dust, moving like dark curtains in the air. They were 8 Apache girls. Their clothes were torn, their skin was bruised. Their breathing was so weak it could barely be seen. Jackson Hale reined his horse hard and jumped down. His heart slammed in his chest, not from fear, but from shock and anger. He had ridden this land for months, trying to make it his home, but he had never seen cruelty like this. He pulled out his knife and cut the first rope. The girl fell into his arms, light as a child, cold as stone. He laid her gently on the ground and moved fast to the next, and then the next. By the time he cut down the last girl, his hands were shaking. Not from effort, but from rage. No one deserved this, not here. Not anywhere. Jackson stood up and looked. Across the dry land he had spent his whole life trying to buy. The cracked soil, the broken fence, the empty sky. And in that moment, something heavy settled in his chest. Peace was never found on land taken with blood, but the truth did not. Change one thing, he was here now. And those 8 dying girls needed him. He carried them one by one into his small wooden cabin. Inside, the fire from the old stove flickered across their faces. He laid blankets on the floor, placing them close together to share warmth. Their skin was so cold that his fingers went numb just touching them. Jackson heated water and crushed dried herbs he had carried since his wandering days. He was no doctor, but long ago he had learned how to keep himself alive when no one else would. Now he tried to do the same for them. Hours passed in silence, broken only by firewood cracking and shallow breaths. One girl opened her eyes. She had hair that reached her waist, a thin face, and sharp eyes that did not miss anything. Her voice was rough, barely sound at all. "You are not with the Derringers." Jackson let out a dry breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "If I was, you would not be alive to ask." The girl looked around. She saw her sisters wrapped in blankets. She saw water near their lips. She saw Jackson's clumsy hands trying to help instead of harm. She touched the bandage on her wrist and gave a small nod of thanks. "My name is Arya." Another girl pushed herself upright. Her eyes were clear and unyielding, even through pain. "I am Lorette," she said. "You saved us, eh?" Jackson stared into the fire for a long moment, because some things you cannot ride past. That was all he said. It was enough. When their strength returned a little, Arya spoke again. Each word carried weight. "This land was never yours. It never belonged to any white man. It is our father's land. Sacred land." Jackson sat down hard. Like a man who had just learned his fortune was built on another man's grave. "The Derringer clan came 10 years ago," Laura continued. "They wanted the underground spring, the only water that keeps this place alive. Our father said no." Arya's voice tightened. "They killed our whole tribe. Everyone except the 8 of us. Our father split the map to the water," Lara said. 8 pieces, 1 for each of us. They could not kill us without losing it forever." Jackson looked up. "Then why were you hanging at my gate?" Arya met his eyes without fear. "We were bait. To draw someone out. To see who would dare help us." A cold feeling crept up Jackson's spine. He had not found them by chance. He had walked straight into a war older than his ranch. The youngest girl, Nemo, whispered, her voice breaking. "If you let us go now, you can still leave." Jackson walked to the window and looked out into the dark. Strange signs around the land finally made sense. "They know someone cut you down," he said quietly. "They will come back." He did not turn when he spoke again. "I spent my life buying this land. If it belongs to you, I will not leave you on it. For the first time, hope flickered in Arya's eyes. Night deepened. The girls slept in exhaustion. Jackson sat by the window with his rifle across his knees. The land felt wrong. Too quiet. Then hooves echoed across the desert. They stopped at the gate. A lazy voice cut through the dark. "Jackson Hale, I know you're home." The girls jolted awake. Arya reached for Jackson's arm, but he raised a finger for silence and stepped outside. Moonlight revealed a man on horseback. Long hair tied back. Black coat worn from use. A rope hung from his saddle, dark with old work. Vandrick Boone smiled. "Well," he said, "you touched what belongs to the Derringers, Jackson." Leaned against the porch post. "I saw 8 people hanging like animals. I cut them down." Boone laughed. "You should have let them die. I am not handing them over." The smile slipped from Boone's face. "Tomorrow," he said coldly, "I come back with my men." He turned his horse and vanished into the dark, leaving only the promise of blood. Jackson stood there long after the sound faded. When he went back inside, 8 pairs of eyes watched him. "You still have time to leave," Arya said. Jackson closed the curtain. "I did not buy land," he said. "I bought a war." The desert night closed in fast, heavy and cold. The wind slipped through the cracks in the cabin walls like a warning that could not be ignored. Outside, no coyotes cried. No insects sang. The land felt empty, as if it was holding its breath. Inside the cabin, the 8 Apache sisters slept in short, broken stretches. Fear followed them even into rest. Jackson did not sleep at all. He sat near the door with his rifle across his lap, listening to every sound, every shift of wind, every creak of wood. Arya woke just before midnight. She moved quietly and stood beside him. "Boone never threatens and waits," she whispered. "If he said tomorrow, he means before sunrise." Jackson nodded. "I know." Not long after, the wind changed. It carried a sharp smell that made Jackson's stomach tighten. Smoke. He stood fast and pushed the door open. Orange light flickered behind the old cattle barn. Flames crawled along dry wood, licking higher with every breath of wind. "They're trying to draw you out," Lara said, gripping his arm. "Do not go." Jackson stopped himself. He knew she was right. If he ran out alone, he would be dead in seconds. But watching the fire eat the barn hurt deeper than fear. That barn was his future, his plan to raise horses, his second chance at life. "They are burning your dream," Paha said quietly. Before Jackson could answer, Sa grabbed a blanket and ran toward the fire. Nima followed without hesitation. Jackson cursed under his breath and ran after them. Together, they beat at the flames, choking on smoke, stamping embers into the dirt before the fire could reach the cabin. Then a sound cut through the night. A sharp scream from a horse. Paha ran toward the gate and dropped to her knees. "Jackson," she said, her voice shaking. "Your horse." Only the saddle remained, thrown into the sand. The reins were shredded. They did not need to kill the horse. They only needed to make sure Jackson could not leave. The message was clear. You stay. You die. When they went back inside, no one spoke for a long time. They sat around the fire, faces marked by soot and fear. "The Derringers never stop," Marisu whispered. "Anyone who helps us becomes a target." Jackson wiped his hands on his pants. "I know, but tonight you saved me too." Something changed then. A thin thread pulled tight between them. Not trust yet, but connection. A sudden crash broke the silence. A rock smashed through the window and hit the wall. Wrapped around it was a scrap of paper. Jackson read it once, then threw it into the fire. "Tomorrow we take the people. We take the land." He looked at the girls. "No one here is alone." Morning came pale and weak. like the sun was afraid to look at the land. None of them had slept. As light crept across the sand, hooves sounded in the distance. Jackson stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. A man with silver hair approached slowly. A faded badge caught the light on his chest. "Easy," the man said. "My name is Marshal. Rovin Pike. I am not here to fight." Jackson did not lower his gun. Pike dismounted and opened a leather bag. Inside were burned papers, maps, and photographs. He handed them over. "I have been tracking the Derringers for 8 years, Pike," said. "Murder, land theft, bribes. Every time I got close, evidence vanished." Arya stepped forward. "You knew what they did to our people." Pike's shoulders sagged. "I knew enough. Not enough to stop them. Until now." He looked at the sisters. "You are living witnesses. If you testify, the Derringers fall." Fear spread across the room. "They will kill us before court," Nima said. Pike nodded. "They will try." Jackson clenched his jaw. "And Boone. He will come tonight," Pike said. "With everyone he has." Silence filled the cabin. When Pike left to signal federal help, Jackson turned to the sisters. "You can still go." Arya shook her head. "If we run, they hunt us forever." "So we stand," Jackson said. By sunset, Pike returned with supplies. Wire, sandbags, oil lamps. Wood they worked without speaking much. Traps were set, windows covered. Weak fences reinforced. Each sister moved with purpose born from loss. As darkness fell, Arya sat beside Jackson. "If tomorrow does not come," she said softly, "know you gave us dignity." "We live," Jackson replied. "All of us." The wind rose again. And far off in the dark, hooves began to move. The night was not over. The night grew unnaturally quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that pressed against the ears until every breath sounded too loud. Jackson stood near the front window, rifle ready. Marshal Pike crouched behind a low barricade outside. Eyes fixed on the dark horizon. Arya was the first to feel it. "They are coming," she whispered. Seconds later, the ground began to tremble. Not one horse. Many shadows slowly formed out of the darkness, spreading wide around the ranch like a closing fist. Torches flickered to life. Men on horseback moved with calm confidence, certain they had already won. Vandrick Boone rode at the front. Jackson Hale. His voice rang out, smooth and cruel. "You have run out of road." Jackson stepped onto the porch, standing tall. "I am not running." Boone laughed. "Then you die with them." A gunshot cracked the air. The bullet slammed into the porch post inches from Jackson's head. Wood splintered. That was the signal. Traps snapped tight. 2 riders were thrown from their horses in a cloud of dust and pain. Arrows flew from the shadows. One man dropped his torch. Another screamed as his hand was pierced clean through. The Derringers scrambled for cover, shocked that resistance came. From girls they had once hung like animals. Marshal Pike fired steady and clean, forcing the men back. "Hold the line," he shouted. Boone snarled and raised his arm. "Burn the house." As men rushed forward with fire, Laura and Tala released another trap. A rope yanked tight, dragging 2 attackers into the sand. Before they could rise, Jackson charged, striking one down with the butt of his rifle. Boone spurred his horse straight toward him, gun drawn. "It ends now." Before he could fire, an arrow struck his horse deep in the neck. The animal reared violently. Boone was thrown hard. Onto the ground, Jackson was there instantly, rifle aimed at Boone's chest. Their eyes locked. One filled with rage and disbelief, the other calm and unmovable. "You think saving 8 girls changes anything?" Boone spat. Jackson's voice was steady. It changes everything. Boone reached for a knife. Arya stepped beside Jackson, her arrow already drawn and aimed at Boone's heart. Then the night exploded with new sound hooves. Many of them. Lanterns lit up the western ridge. Federal marshals Pike shouted, "Drop your weapons." The derringers froze. One by one, guns fell into the sand. Boone was bound, his face twisted with fury as he was dragged away. The fight was over. When dawn broke, the ranch stood scarred, but standing. The barn was burned, fences were broken, but the people were alive. All of them. Jackson walked into the yard, the morning light washing over ash and dust. The 8 sisters stood together, no longer victims, but survivors. Marshal Pike spoke quietly. "With your testimony, the Derringers are finished." Arya nodded. "Justice comes slow, but it comes." Later that day, the sisters placed their 8 pieces of the map on the table, forming the path of the hidden water source. "You should take it back," Jackson said. "It is yours." Arya shook her head. "We are not here to take. We are here to share." Jackson looked around at the land, broken but breathing. He felt something he had not felt in years. Belonging. They began rebuilding that same afternoon. One board, one nail, one promise at a time. The desert watched in silence. A place once ruled by fear became something else entirely. A home.